this is the moment to double down on our support, give them what they need, whether it's the tanks or the long-range artillery fires. They need to kick Putin out of the whole of the territory.
The Japanese Prime Minister said, if you want to push back against President Xi, beat Putin in Ukraine. We need to have a total focus on defeating the Russians in Ukraine.
There is some pushback on Capitol Hill to that, Republicans and others mentioning the price. However, unified when it comes to supporting Ukraine. You could hear that from the former Prime Minister of Great Britain. NBC News says Western allies differ over fighter jets for Ukraine as Russia claims gains. Asked at the White House on Monday if the United States would provide F-16s, Biden told reporters no. But France and Poland appear to be willing to entertain any such request from Ukraine, with Macron telling reporters in The Hague on Monday that by definition nothing is excluded when it comes to military assistance. So we'll start there with our panel. Fox News at Night anchor Trace Gallagher, Carl DeMaio, chairman of the Reform California talk radio host, and Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist. Trace, you know, there is some concern, and you hear it, but people like Boris Johnson say this is the time to make this happen.
Yeah, and Tom Cotton echoes that, and you have a lot of others saying this is the time because, as Mitch McConnell said, now is the time to show President Xi that we are going after Russia and we're not going to take any flack from anybody. At the same time, I talked to General Jack Keane today. He's very concerned about how much weaponry we have. These Abrams tanks are being built. It could take 6 months or a year to get them into Ukraine. And the question is, if in fact China ever does go into Taiwan, do we have the deterrence necessary to be able to say, don't do it? And now the question comes up, if we keep giving them Abrams tanks and it moves on to fighter jets, these were all hard lines, right? They were no, no, no. And now the tanks are a yes and the jets are a maybe, and maybes always become yes.
Right. And there has been this evolution, Leslie, and the former Prime Minister talked about that. Long gone are the concerns about crossing some line based on what equipment you're giving.
I would agree exactly with what you said, that the maybe becomes yes. And, you know, we have to realize that, you know, President Biden is not making this decision in a vacuum. I mean, we have the greatest military minds in the world and the greatest military in the world that are helping to make this decision. And I think when we look at the success so far of Ukraine and how long they have, you know, held Russia at bay and even defeated them in some areas of Ukraine, that this is the way to do it. You know, Democrats have been saying this is the time to double down. You have Republicans saying this. You have, you know, the former Prime Minister and our allies saying this. But I don't think that the president is ignoring what we're saying. I just think the timing of when this is coming out, based on things he knows and our military knows, that we're not all privy to.
Carl, when you talk to folks, do you hear concerns about this?
Absolutely. And the American people will support freedom fighters. And I have to say that there's a lot of admiration for the Ukrainian people rising up and defending their freedoms. However, we should not have American men and women on the ground and putting their lives at risk. We also need to demand accountability. There is a tremendous amount of corruption in these foreign aid packages, the military packages. And so what we need to demand is that these funds are properly spent. If we're going to get involved in giving them equipment to have them fight this battle, that's one thing. But if we're going to be generous, let's make sure we're not fools at the same time.
But I would say, who's going to fly the jets? Right? I mean, that's the whole thing, as we talk about if there are F-16s going to Ukraine, who flies them? They say we've got some people trained. That's going to take another 6 months to a year to train them. Who flies the jets? And then you go from just jets to Americans flying jets, and then it's an entirely different ballgame.
Right. And the first American soldier, and there have been people, Americans over there killed, but the first active duty soldier fighting in Ukraine is a different story that Russia will tell.
Oh, Russia's already telling a different story, right? I mean, Russia basically, you know, tells their people, and the people sadly believe it, you know, the propaganda that they have out there that, you know, they're defending themselves. You know, they're not the aggressors. They're not the perpetrators. Ukraine is, or that, look, you know, this is all part of Russia. And You know, the Russian people believe what they're spoon-fed by, you know, their leader. And we've seen that in countries like Russia. We see it in North Korea. We see it in China. But at the end of the day, the United States and our allies will continue to support freedom. And that's what Ukraine is seeking so desperately and doing quite successfely, although it's slow.
I want to turn topics. This investigation into the documents and what the White House has been doing and saying about it. It has been this drip, drip, drip. Kate Bedingfield on talking about this. Take a listen.
If you are indeed being transparent, why the continued trickle of disclosure around these classified documents?
We have released multiple statements from the White House, and President Biden's personal attorney has released multiple statements over the last month, walking through the process and agreeing to be fully cooperative with the Justice Department. This is a process that plays out. We are responsive to the Justice Department's requests.
Right, but it's a process, Carl, that has continued to evolve with what we know. CBS News, FBI searched the Penn Biden Center in mid-November. The FBI searched the Penn Biden Center offices in mid-November, according to two sources familiar with the investigation. We've confirmed that now. After lawyers for President Biden had found 10 documents marked classified there on November 2nd. Two sources told CBS News the search was conducted with the cooperation of Mr. Biden's representatives. A search warrant was not sought. We just found out about this.
What you're seeing are two different systems of justice in this country. And, you know, when it's done by President Trump, there are raids. They tip off the media. There are helicopters flying over. It's wall-to-wall coverage. When it's President Biden, they make a request. They schedule a meeting. It's not a raid. It's simply a visit. And, of course, a lot of this stuff was known prior to the midterm election, yet the American people went into yet another midterm election without the facts. And who's responsible for that? The U.S. Department of Justice. And that's why the American people are losing trust and confidence in the DOJ and this whole process.
Most important U.S. problem, Trace, government is now 21%, according to Gallup poll. Inflation 15, immigration 11. But there is this lack of trust in the institutions.
Yeah, and the numbers jump. I mean, that's the whole thing. You look at immigration. Immigration 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago was 8%. Now it's 11%. That's a 40% jump. It's because people are starting to cover it, right? Others, except for Fox News, are covering this, and all of a sudden people are like, oh, there's a problem at the border. You look at the government, it's kind of the same thing, is that now everybody's covering these documents, and not just Fox News Channel, and people are skeptical of the things they're hearing. You could have said, had this run the same poll back when Russian collusion, which was all kind of this big hoax when it was going on, and the government numbers would not have been that high. But now that you have people kind of following the bouncing ball, the rest of the country is looking at it like, yeah, this is kind of bad.
House and Senate intel has not received briefings about what the specific documents on either one, former president or the current president. And so there's a lot of people wondering, you know, what is this all about?
Yes, but I have so much to say. First of all, if this had been, you know, told the minute, you know, that they found these documents to the American people, wouldn't have changed the outcome of the election at all. You know, it wasn't on the hit parade of any voter. It doesn't matter if they're Democrat, Republican, Independent, or undecided, first of all. Second of all, if Trump sneezes, there's coverage. Third, you know, you had a subpoena because they asked for the documents. National Archives asked for the documents. Department of Justice wasn't liked before. I mean, so this is nothing new. I don't think it's two sets of rules. You know, I asked an attorney who happens to be a Republican, what would you advise your clients to say, whether they were president or not, in this situation? And he said, there's a special counsel, don't say a word. Let them do their job. And I think that's what former President Trump should do, what current President Biden should do. Let the special counsel do their job. And lastly, President Biden is a sitting president. Donald Trump is a former president. Former presidents are treated differently than sitting presidents, and that doesn't matter if they're a Democrat or a Republican.
In the eyes of the American people, this is about trust and confidence. If you're going to go after a former president, then you got to do it by the book. And what they're doing here is completely disregarding the well-founded concerns that the American people have. They don't trust the DOJ. This is the same DOJ, by the way, but more people are not trusting it because this is the same DOJ that proceeded forward with the Russia collusion hoax, then lied about the Hunter Biden laptop, then did raids on President Trump, but now it's just a courtesy visit for the sitting incumbent president. Look, if you're going to do it, you have to treat people fairly. It has to be transparent. The only reason why we have a special counsel investigating Biden is because all this leaked out. That's the only reason why there's a special counsel.
Because he wanted to be fair and the American people wanted it.
These are not presidential documents. These are vice presidential documents and Senate documents, so there's a difference.
I mean, the Attorney General is going to sound like Oprah pretty soon. You get a special counsel. You get a
well, Mike Pence is going to get a special counsel. We know that, and you know that Clinton, Obama, and Bush are all going check the garage, check everywhere for documents.
But if they come to different conclusions, to your point, Carl, that's where it's going to get really sticky.
It is. That's exactly right. And that's the whole thing is, and that's part and parcel of why every time Karine Jean-Pierre gets up there, it's, you got to check with special counsel. Let's check. Let me defer to this, because they want the story to come from one set, and every time it trickles out, it changes what the final product might eventually turn out to be.
Well, it's been good to be here in L.A. in person. Thank you very much for letting us sit in your set. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.